Welcome to Dare a New Belief, a place to discover what is possible for your life after the loss of a loved one, and where you will find inspiration, insight, support, and love, and hopefully a bit of laughter to help you through the day. Now here's your host, Nada Hogan.
Welcome to Dare a New Belief, the podcast where you become inspired and you have creative ideas to begin to live your life completely on purpose, knowing that there is more for you in this epic life that you are living. Today, my guest is Lisbeth Tanz, and you will love her. I've come to know about her just recently. I would say there's a great connection. I really enjoy speaking with Liz. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. So Liz is a nonfiction book ghostwriter, editor, and author coach at Fuzzy Dog LLC. Liz's forte is assisting authors in writing their authentic truths and creating compelling stories so they can make a positive difference in the world. And we're not going to talk about any of that. We may a little bit, but Liz has such a powerful story that I know will touch so many lives. And I think people just need to have that inspiration and that knowledge and power of knowing that you can overcome anything. And I think having those models in our lives gives us the permission to be able to overcome whatever our tragedy or challenges or circumstances happens to be. So Liz, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Nada, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be talking with you today.
Thank you. Well, it's truly my honor having you. And I just kind of want to dive in here a little bit, get started with your story when you were young. I know that you had some illnesses when you were young. You started off, your little life with some health issues. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Just where you started when you came into this world that's so beautiful and loving and you're experiencing all the love and beauty in this world now.
Okay. Well, when I was born with a cataract in my right eye. I also was born with severe asthma and allergies. So when I was 3, they removed the cataract, but because of the way it had attached in my eye, it permanently damaged the eye. So I've never had binocular vision. Suddenly I would wake up one day and have it. I think I'd have to relearn to walk and do things because my brain would not know how to function. Mm-hmm. The asthma and allergies, I just kind of had to live with because I was born in 1962. So back then there really were no rescue inhalers. Primatene Mist was the first one that came about when I was a little bit older, but it was challenging because there were so many things I couldn't do as a kid that all my friends could do. Yeah. It is one of the reasons I'm a ghostwriter today and I work in the book industry, because books were my friends. It's not that I didn't have friends. I don't want to sound that bad, but yeah, they were the ones that were my constants.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So starting off your life a little bit, with the health issues, it holds you back a little bit. So I do have friends, but I have these books that are more of my dear companions and I'm relating with them. And so I'm just stuck on this piece. You were saying you would have like walking with the cataract? There was things that were even inhibiting your walking or making that more difficult. Did I hear that right?
Well, no, what I was saying is if I would ever have sight that involved 2 eyes, because I've only always seen out of my left eye, I think my brain would kind of freak out because suddenly I'd have dual vision and I have no idea what that's like because I've never seen that way.
Wow.
My reality has always been through one eye.
Wow. So I heard that completely incorrectly. So thank you for straightening me out on that. Well,
sure.
It's amazing. It's just amazing. We can go down a whole field with this one. So I'm going to bring this back in, but all right. So there was some health issues that started off. And by the way, how is your asthma now? Where is that at in your adult life?
Well, some of the allergies that I had, I outgrew, which was great, but I will always have asthma. It's under control. These days, I take medication to keep it under control. And life is great. There's not too much that I cannot do at this point.
Yeah.
So that's a nice plus to the medical field.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know that stress completely wreaks havoc in our body all of the time if we're stressed, and it's going to have a physiological response. When you get yourself into or find yourself in a stressful situation, do you notice that your asthma is kicking in quicker, or do you even know, does it affect your asthma? I'm assuming that it would, but maybe you have that under control enough that you don't notice it showing up in asthma.
That is a really good question. And I'm not sure I can answer that. I have to think about it because I am blessed, is probably the right word to use, to live a very low stress life these days.
Oh, good.
Compared to what I was living even 5 years ago. So I would say yes. I mean, especially if the stress is more of a physical stress. Certainly if I would go out and try to run a marathon, or I'm sorry, even run a block, I probably would have to stop, use my rescue inhaler, and then keep going till my knees would start complaining.
Yeah.
So yes, I would say it probably does affect my breathing. I tend to breathe pretty shallow, and I've been working on that because breathing fully is much better for the body. But as an asthma sufferer, we tend to breathe with our chest because it's a habit. You know, when you can't breathe, what do you feel happening? It's your chest going up and down. So I try to be aware of that. I am a singer, although I'm taking a hiatus because of my allergies, unfortunately. And singing with asthma is very interesting. It's actually pretty therapeutic. There are other reasons why I decided to take up singing, and I'll try to remember that when we get farther into my story as far as kind of how that affected me in stepping up. And I didn't do that until I was 50. So it's not like I've been doing this a long time.
Wow. That's fabulous. Oh, we'll swing back. I have a mark here. We're swinging back to how you got into singing at 50. I think that's fantastic. One of the reasons that I was asking you with the stress, because it just occurred to me, you and I have spoken before, but different things, right? We always, different environment, different conversation, and then different ideas are spurred on. And it just occurred to me that grief in Chinese medicine is carried on the lung channel, because I also do acupuncture and oriental medicine. And if you came to me and you said you had asthma and can you help me to get my asthma under control, or, you know, can we work on the asthma? The very first thing that I would ask you is, do you suffer from any grief, or have you had an experience in your life where there was a huge grieving process or some kind of a trauma to your life? Because that's what the lung channel does in Chinese medicine. It carries the grief, or, you know, that kind of a trauma. So, so if we can segue into that a little bit, if we can go into like the deeper part of this conversation, where, because I know when you were young, you had some pretty horrific things happening, and, you know, can you take us down a little bit of that path gently?
Sure. I will preface it by saying that what I'll tell you, I didn't remember until I became sexually active as a teenager.
Yeah.
So I probably suffered from Stockholm syndrome a little bit in my youth. My brother, who is 8 years older than me, decided when I was 2 that I would be a great person to explore his growing sexual interests. That's like a really, you know, professional way of saying it. Saying my brother molested me, and it started when I was quite young, and had no words to describe what was happening for me. So I'm not surprised that I suppressed the memories because I didn't understand what was going on. Like I said, I didn't remember this until I was probably 16, when my first boyfriend and I started fooling around. And I woke up one morning with memories I couldn't account for. And it was devastating. And I could see me progressing through my childhood age-wise. and having these new memories of my brother. And I really didn't understand where to go with them.
Yeah.
And of course, so I talked to my current boyfriend, and he was sort of helpful, but not really, because I think he was weirded out, understandably weirded out.
Yeah.
And at some point, and I wish I could tell you when, I talked with my sister, who is 6 years older and who was terrorized by my brother, but not molested. And she was able to confirm everything. And she was devastated. She truly thought I would never remember.
Yeah.
But being just that much younger than my brother and being afraid of my brother, she didn't go to my parents, even though she knew what was happening was wrong.
Right.
And I don't blame her for that. I don't know what I would have done if I'd been in her shoes. But the comfort that she gave me was knowing I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't some wackadoodle making things up about my brother, whom I had idolized. I mean, I was like my brother's shadow. You know, we worked on cars together. We cleaned cars together. He would let me hang out sometimes with him and his friends. You know, it just was, it was overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And especially the part where you idolize him and that bond and being with him and just how good it felt. And then to have this memory, because I know when we had spoke before, you had said, then I just found it so profound that you went to bed one night as a teenager and woke up in the morning as an abused child, knowing that you went to bed as one person and woke up in the morning as something different, because there was this realization that something had happened in your life. Liz, can you tell me and tell the listeners what that was like, that just that when you idolize that person and then you realize, oh my God, like, did that part take years to be able to work through? Or how did that part play out? The idolizing him and now the whole complete opposite of, oh my God, what happened all of those years ago? What happened for all of those years?
I'm happy to talk about that. It was emotionally, it was devastating. Recently there was a documentary that came out about Michael Jackson. I'm sure you've heard about it, Leaving Neverland. And in that, they're interviewing two men who were molested by Michael Jackson. And one of them said, I realized that when I finally admitted to myself, I realized my whole childhood was a lie. And that's what it felt like to me. I had never put it in that kind of term, but it fit, because everything that I thought that kept me safe, that was real and true, wasn't. And that certainly changed my relationship with my brother, which confused him, because, you know, before I was this adoring little sister, and then I became this angry monster. Now, I should also tell you that in the course of growing up, my brother was a relentless teaser.
Yeah.
So he would poke me, literally poke me with his finger. He would tickle me to extremes. In fact, when I was 3, he came into my room and tickled me so much, and that I fell out of my bed and my chin hit the woodwork that was in my room, and it broke my chin open and I bled everywhere. My dad had to take me to the emergency room, which was downtown, very far from our home.
Wow.
You know, so that's the kind of stuff that he would do. And what he would say is, in that particular instance, I said, well, the light was off. I was trying to go to sleep. And he said, oh no, the light was on. It was like, oh no, it wasn't. And my parents sided with my brother because he was older.
Oh,
and
no.
I do remember that. That was not a memory that I had suppressed, because I was mad. You know, it's like, nobody's listening to me.
Right.
And so in terms of how have I been able to integrate this over the course of years, it's taken me years, because what happens when you're abused that young is you not only lose a piece of the child that you could have been, you lose the adult you could have been if this had not happened. So there was a lot of anger for me around what had happened. And I spent a lot of my adult life looking backwards, wishing I could be different, wishing things could be different. Of course, they can't be, because I've got this life. I'm living this life right now, and I can't go back.
Right.
The last time I was in therapy about it was really the time that it has finally stuck, where because of other reasons, I'm in a relationship, and I was beginning to exhibit behaviors that were a little nuts. Let's just say that. And I was afraid of losing my relationship. And it's like, okay, I have to go back into therapy because I'm not dealing with things really well. And I know I can, but I feel like I've lost that ability. And I found a fabulous therapist. And I finally allowed myself to completely open up. Because, sometimes you can game the system. You can game the therapist.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that this time. And I just let the pain flow. And that was hard.
Yeah.
Anybody who's been through that will say that.
I can only imagine. So this last therapist that you went to, where you really opened up, how long ago was that?
That was 2015.
So not that long ago, still pretty recent.
No, it was spurred. One of the things that I grew up feeling was that I was never good enough. And I know a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
Nothing I did would be perfect. I'm a recovering perfectionist. But not being good enough colored my life everywhere. Even when I would do things that were extraordinary. I was very good at my corporate job, but I would never really fully feel the success. I was always moving on to the next thing, so I would still be perceived as good enough. And honestly, I would react to things in a kind of, if something happened that was not what I expected, I reacted in a fairly childish way. I learned how to hide that, but inside I was still reacting like a 2-year-old.
Oh, wow. And you were aware of that? So when you were in the corporate world, you were totally aware that you were responding like a 2-year-old inside, even though it wasn't being, you weren't showing that to the world. Were you conscious of that, or was it down the path that you started realizing that, oh my God, this is what I've been doing to handle this kind of upset in my life?
Oh no, I was fully aware. For whatever reason, I've been very self-aware most of my life. And I always felt like there's something wrong with me. And in one sense, there really was. I kind of got stuck emotionally when it came to personal relationships at a really young age. And I had to figure out ways to overcome that. And when I finally found Kathleen, my last therapist, she was able to really help me zero in on where that was coming from and how I was still manifesting that, and ways to be able to not react that way, to stop being reactive. It was almost like she helped turn off a switch in my head. And suddenly that voice that I always equated with my mother stopped. It stopped. And to have that silence in my head was amazing. Suddenly I wasn't saying these nasty things to myself. I once had a psychic say, I've never met somebody who self-flagellates to the degree that you do. She said, you must really hate yourself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So, it's no wonder that I've gone through the majority of my life suicidal at varying points in my life, because it's like, what's the point? Why am I here? Well, I have a son, so even though when I left the corporate world, I left partly because I was incredibly burned out and suicidal to the point that I was sitting up at night trying to get the courage up to go down to my car, get in it, drive away, and run into a brick wall. I remember thinking that and just sobbing because I was so unhappy.
Yeah. Wow. And how old was your son then, Liz?
He was probably 17. So he was older. And he was having his own issues. And, when you grow up with a mom that's kind of messed up, I really tried to hide it, but I couldn't hide everything. He's going to be 35. So we've had conversations about this. At first he was a little taken aback that I would even want to talk about that. But, and when I say that, it's how he was raised and how I was with him. And I traveled a lot when he was younger because I was the corporate person. My ex-husband was the tool and die guy. And, so we went on great vacations and we fixed up our house and we did all these things because I did this job.
Yeah.
But I missed a lot of my son's growing up years. And we actually have a really tight relationship now. Leaving my corporate job at 17 was the right thing to do, not for my marriage, but it was the right thing to do for my son and for my parents, who ended up passing away. Well, my mom in 2003. So a year or so after I left corporate America, and then my dad in 2006.
Yeah. Okay. So your son must have, and I'm sorry, when parents pass away, I don't want to just skim over that. So, yeah. Your son then knows about the abuse, the molestation that happened to you as a child, right?
He knows of it. I didn't go into any detail with him.
Yeah.
I just said, this happened. This is why I'm not talking to Uncle Terry anymore.
Yeah.
This is why things have panned out the way they have with our family relationships.
Yeah. How did he receive it? Because I'm thinking about my son. There was something that happened with me when I was a teenager, and I had shared it with my son because his girlfriend was going through a similar thing. And I had shared this in high school. I had an abusive boyfriend, and I was sharing that with my son because his girlfriend had been in an abusive relationship. And when I had told him, he wasn't a kid. He was probably 24, 5. I mean, still a kid, but he's still a young man. And he was like 24 or 5. And he was just like, I don't even want to know that. It was so painful to know that the woman he knows is his mom, right? Because they just see us as a mom. They're not always thinking that there was this life that happened before you became a mom and all of this other growing up and developing and understanding of our own selves that we have to go through. But I was so surprised. He was just like, I just don't want to know anything about it. You're okay now? And it's like, yeah, I'm good. And he's like, okay, that's all I want to know. And I would have these deep conversations with his girlfriend, but never with him. And so I'm just curious, like, how did your son receive that information about your brother?
I didn't want to make it sound like this big, heavy deal, even though for me, it is a big, heavy deal. The only reason I really wanted to tell him that anything had happened was because I was no longer speaking to my brother, and that I had no intention of ever speaking to him again, and that I really didn't care whatever happened to him. And it affected our family dynamic because both of his grandparents were now gone, and now here's this uncle that he's seen, sporadically through his life is no longer part of his life. And it was my son's decision to break off communication with my brother's child. I didn't ask him to do that because my son can live his own life, but he was never close to his cousin and felt that his cousin actually was a little weird. So it honestly, it didn't, that I don't think affected him as much as when I left my last husband, because he is the man that my son calls him his name, his given name, but he thinks of him as his dad, because my first husband is his biological father, but they aren't close. His dad doesn't even live in the state. And that was harder for him. And it was much harder for him to understand, partly because my ex-husband has this very large extended family, and I was hated for leaving. I was hated. And since then, everybody's kind of come around. It's not like they welcome me with completely open arms, but his sisters have welcomed me back into the family. When my son got married, that was the first time I'd seen any of them in 10 years. And it was great. It was great to get back in touch with them. And I felt like part of my life healed in that moment, which was great because nobody likes to be disliked.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And that's why I stayed as long as I did. I stayed, I guess, 7 or 8, 9 years longer than I should have. Our marriage devolved pretty quickly. We were really good friends. We should have stayed friends.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just can't imagine you have all of this other stuff behind you, and now you have this extended family that hates you for getting a divorce from your husband. Did that trigger anything else? Did it spur on any of the stuff from before? Part of that, I have to be the perfectionist. I have to do everything completely well. I have so many questions that I want to ask you, Liz. Oh, my Lord. Because I can feel that pain of being ousted from a family I think that's enormous. Plus, you already have this going on with your brother. And if I can circle back to that for a second, did you talk to your parents about what had happened with your brother?
It's a good question. I did. And I think I was around 21 when I did it, but I honestly don't remember. My mother said nothing, and my dad was very flustered and upset. And the only thing I remember him saying was, "That happens in families sometimes." And that was the end of the discussion.
Wow.
And I never brought it up again. I just didn't. I have to imagine that my mother felt guilty because she was in the house when things were happening and she had no clue. Although I think she knew something, but never said anything, never did anything about it. And I only say that because one day when I was older, my brother and I were sitting in my mom and dad's kitchen, and she was reading a letter in the newspaper to Dear Abby, and it was exactly like what my brother had done to me. And she was reading it, and I'm sitting there, I'm staring at my brother, waiting, and he's looking all around the room. And finally, I get this really quick glance from him to me. And in that moment, I got the answer that I had been wondering is, okay, is this, and my sister said it was true, but I need to know from him. And in that moment, I knew it was, because I could see right through what his look was saying. My mom seemed to be completely oblivious to this. And I have no idea why she read that letter to us, other than she knew. And this was before I had said anything. So I think I was older when I actually finally said something to my parents. But I don't remember. Sometimes I forget things on purpose because it was painful. It was painful not being believed. And yes, when I left my last husband, it was painful leaving because no one believed that I really had a good reason for leaving. It's like, we haven't had sex in 7 years, and before that it was sporadic to begin with. And, we're just living parallel lives, but we're not living lives together. This is not what I signed up for. And he's a really nice guy. And that made it even harder because everybody likes him.
Right.
So I lost not only his family, but I lost all of our friends because all of his friends were my friends. And I had very few of my own friends.
Oh, man.
The other thing that ended up happening was I felt so guilty about this. I was breaking out in hives, and it was that emotional representation. I was also going through perimenopause. That was part of it as well. But when I would get stressed, I would break out in hives on my hands and my feet, and it was incredibly itchy and awful. And I also got into a relationship with a guy who was 11 years younger than me and was a sociopath. He was awful. And I stayed with that guy for 3 years. And in some regard, I believe I deserved that because look what I did to my ex-husband.
And not conscious. You weren't consciously thinking that, or were there bits of pieces where there was like that little spark of, I know what I'm doing and I'll just push that away because I feel like I deserve this because of what I did to my ex-husband? Or was it completely unconscious?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I knew what I was doing.
Isn't that just?
It was, when I look back on it now, it's, again, I can consciously forget. I think that's human nature.
Yeah.
But I have pictures. I still have things from the relationship because I loved his kids. They were great. But he was incredibly emotionally abusive. He gaslighted me constantly. He cheated on me. I mean, it was one of those when I finally talked to my girlfriends, because I had friends by then, and told them what was going on and that I needed to get out of this relationship, they generously offered to move him out of our apartment. And that's exactly what they did. They showed up one morning with two city police officers and moved him
Wow.
out. Wow, this is amazing. Then, I had gotten like a pod or something and it was sitting in front of our apartment building, and they moved all the stuff into there. And that was when I started to breathe again.
Yeah. How did he handle that, especially being a sociopath? How did he respond to you? Did he know that he was going to get, okay, how did that go down?
He walked out of the bathroom. He had just taken a shower. There was a door between that part of the apartment and the dining room. So I had closed the dining room door, and he came out. He's like, "So what do you want to do today?" And then he realized he was hearing voices, and he's like, "Who's here?" And I said, "You need to know that you're being moved out today." And he's like,
Wow.
"What?" And he was angry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when I opened the door and I said, "You need to know that the police are here. So don't do anything. You might be
Right.
thinking of
Yeah.
doing, don't do it." And
Yeah.
then I just said, when I met you, I thought you were the greatest thing. I would have given you the moon because I loved you that much. So, but I didn't realize who you were. And now I
Yeah.
see very clearly who you are, and you're someone I do not need or want in my life.
Yeah.
And he packed up a few things himself. The conundrum was he was driving my car.
Oh no.
So
Not good.
yeah. So he requested to be able to continue using it, and I did say yes. And then he asked if I would go car shopping with him, and I did. I figured this is a little tiny price to pay to get him out of my life. And
Yeah.
he fought the relationship breakup, and then he did some other things that weren't very nice. And then finally he gave up. And that was great. And then he moved out of the area. And that day I messaged my son, because my son was an adult by then, but his relationship had fallen apart, and he was living with me and this guy in the apartment.
Okay.
And then my son bought a house, and that we both left that apartment. But I messaged my son and I said, "Hey, he moved away." And my son was like, "Oh, thank God."
Yeah.
And that was my response. And my current fiance, because yes, I believe in love, and Mike is amazing. He is the kind of man I wish I could have met when I was 20, but didn't, because I was too messed up and I couldn't attract somebody like him. And he loves me, warts and all. He was very supportive of me getting therapy because he didn't want the relationship to end. And so we're going to get married next year. But
Awesome.
so there is a happy ending to all of this. And if anybody's going through this, the hardest part is seeing your way through. And it's funny, as I'm saying this, I'm getting emotional, but it is hard to know that you're worth it if you don't think you ever are. And that there may be people around who completely think you're worth it. You just need to be able to hear it. You need to be able to set aside whatever it is that you're holding about yourself. And, this little bag of anger and hate and self-loathing, and try to set it aside and let some of that light come in. Because that's what I fought for so long. And I think if I had not had my son, I probably would have committed suicide, because I didn't feel like I had anything to live for. So in that regard, I never planned to have children. I am not a religious person, but I do give God credit for seeing the way through that. I got pregnant at 21 and had my son at 21 because I needed an anchor.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So Liz, how did you do it? I know that this was a long, windy road and there's a lot that happened in there, but what do you think was the biggest thing that helped you to get that? If I was to say self-worth, and I'm doing it in air quotes, I actually hate air quotes, but I'm doing it in air quotes, but that feeling of your own deserving, that you are worthy of having love and a relationship that is mutually, not saying that the third husband wasn't respectful, but if you're in a marriage and it's, nobody's having sex and 7 years have gone by, and if you want to live like roommates, then that's all cool. But if that's not what you want, then what are all of the steps or a few of the steps that you took to get you to where you are now? And before you tell us that, I think the thing that you said that's so profound is that you couldn't have attracted somebody like Mike into your life when you were younger because you just weren't there. That wasn't what you were attracting, and it was all still part of that healing process. But what are a couple of things that you did that helped you to know that there was some kind of light or a string of hope or something to hold on to until the next morning to take that next step? Do you know what those are, or is it?
Wow.
Yeah. Do you know what those are?
I'm not sure I've ever tried to articulate them as steps. For me, part of it was my son, because even though he is all grown up and on his own, he's still my son. And I would never want to hurt him that way. I would never want to leave him, in a very sudden suicidal type of way. So that was kind of always my touchstone. But in the deepest depths of what I called my pit of despair, when I could not see my way clear, I just, honestly, I'm not sure there were steps. It was the belief that I'm here, if it's not for me to feel good, who can I help to be better? If I can't do it for myself, can I do this for someone else? Whatever that meant, whether it meant selling, when I was in the corporate world, selling market research to a client who really, really needed it to see if their new product would work, or if it was to, a friend who needed somebody to lean on because they were heartbroken over something that had happened, and I'm a great listener.
Yeah.
So it was just that feeling that I'm here for a reason. But if I also think about from, say, 2015 to now, I don't want to give anybody the impression that I am like carefree and life is always awesome, because there are situations where I revert back to, I'm an introvert by nature anyway. I can be an extroverted introvert, but there are times when I just kind of go into myself. And conferences like the one that we met at, I was very much into me, and it was scary. That's the first big conference I've been to in 9 years. So I was putting myself out there in a big way. And not only that, but I was putting myself out to share this story. And so there was a lot of emotional self-care that I had to do. And there are still times when I will feel less than or not good enough, especially if something happens in a public way and you may not know it, because I've got these coping mechanisms that still will kick in. But the way I deal with it afterwards is different. That's the part that changed. Instead of going back to self-flagellating and ruminating over what could have been and what I should have done, it's like, oh, that happened. No big deal. Nobody died. I can move on now. And it won't happen again. And that has been so freeing. I mean, it sounds trite to say nobody died. Well, nobody did. And that would be, to me, the worst outcome ever. So in most situations where silly little things happen where I feel embarrassed, that's when I would kick into I'm awful, I'm a terrible person, I don't deserve to live. And I would say those things very seriously to myself. I'm sounding like I'm joking, but I really believed it.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. The place where you started from and where you're at now, and just right. And when we say those kinds of things to ourselves, to be able to pull ourselves up and out of that and beyond that, and even knowing it's all a work in process. And so there's still times that you revert back. Do you still have those powerful self-loathing, you are not worthy words? Do you have those, or are they less? Have they lessened, and do you catch them much quicker? Or do those kinds of phrases and words even come to you anymore?
They rarely show up anymore. More so, more likely what will show up for me now, and these usually came in tandem, is a physical response. So if you think about, if you've ever been embarrassed, kind of what that might feel like, like, ugh, and it's almost like I don't want to say a punch to the gut, but it's like your heart kind of withers a little bit and you feel a little smaller. That's a very tangible feeling for me, to know that I'm in that space. Now, I'm already aware that I'm in that space, but that's the tangible feeling of, oh yeah, that's where I've gone. And it's like, okay, I'm going to give myself a moment or two to feel this, because I'm feeling this for a reason. Okay, so I'm embarrassed, or I'm upset, or somebody did something, but then it does pass. It's like, okay, I lived through that. Now let's move on. And it's much easier now because I've been doing it a lot more, especially after working with my last therapist, in how to catch it early on and how to stop my brain from beginning to cycle down. Because that's what would happen, is I would start in a spot and then suddenly I'd end up in my dungeon of despair. And there's a payoff for that. See, this is the thing most people don't realize, is if you've grown up this way, if you've always felt this way, there is a physical, I don't know if it's serotonin, there is a payoff, an emotional payoff to feeling bad. And once I realized that it was like a little really depressing high of, oh, I'm going to sit in all these really bad thoughts and I feel like crap, but there's a part of me that's getting off on this. Yeah. That's the cycle that has to stop. And I wish I could tell you how I was able to do that and how I recognize it now, but it is almost like a runner's high or a chocolate high. And for me, it's a physical feeling. It's like, oh, and the other day I realized I haven't done that in a while. I used to sit and make up stuff about, say, Mike, oh, well, he's never cheated on me. I don't ever anticipate that he will, but I'd sit and make stuff up because I was getting that little rush of depression. I don't know how else to say it, but that is what it felt like. And I realized I don't do that anymore. Isn't that interesting? Because I don't feel the need to do that. It doesn't serve me. I have so many wonderful things going on in my life. I've met you. I've met, other people that were at that conference. I've got, my business is doing really well, and I've got plans to scale up this year. I'm just, Mike's kids are both in college and they're growing to these amazing adults. And my son is having his first child in June. I mean, and I have 3 crazy cats. I mean, that life is good. Yes. That's fantastic. And you can hear it. You can completely hear the shift and change in your voice, in your energy, when you start talking about where you're at now and how everything has shifted and changed and come around. Just so the listeners know, do you think you could have done this on your own to get from where you were at 21, let's just say 21, to where you are now? Do you think you could have done that without the therapist, and even the ones that didn't really serve you as well? Maybe they were just stepping stones or whatever the other therapist did. But when you got to this last therapist that really was able to turn the tide for you and allow you to see so much more and really be able to regain your life, right? I mean, just to have all of that back. Could you have done any of this without the therapist, do you think, or no? Do you think that was an integral part for your healing to get where you are? I can only speak for me. I think if I had been able to do all of this on my own, I would have. But what I kept
Yeah.
running into was a door. There was
Yeah.
that emotional, mental door that I could not open on my own, even though I tried. And there were times I'd get glimpses, like I could open it a little bit and see what was on the other side, but then it would snap shut again because I didn't believe I deserved what was there.
Right.
And it really, for me, wasn't until I was able to find someone who could help me not only open the door, but position it so it can never go shut again.
Yeah.
I really don't think I could have done it on my own. I mean, I work in the self-help industry. That's why I work with authors that want to write books in this industry, because I've read so many books and some
Yeah.
have been more helpful than others. I will give a plug to Elizabeth Gilbert, because Eat, Pray, Love was what finally convinced me it was time to leave my last marriage.
Mm.
And her book was not a self-help book in a lot. It was for her, but it really, I don't think she intended it that way, but it was for me. But no,
Right.
I really feel that I needed somebody to take my hand who could truly listen to me and who could help me parse what I was saying and what I was feeling, and helping me see the fraud in the statements. I'm not an awful person.
Yeah.
I do deserve to be loved. I do deserve to be happy. And she was great at being able to do that, and not necessarily in that really overt way. It was all, kind of a covert way of getting me to see my life differently and to unpack my baggage. That was a big thing.
Yeah.
I'll always have baggage. I will always be a work in progress. But I'm just in such a better place than I was.
Yeah. I think we are all a work in progress. And I think when it's time for us to say adios to this world and go to wherever it is that we go to, I think even then it's like, damn, but I wasn't done, because I was just getting ready to discover this piece of me, and, give me another 100 years. Let me get this all. But I think we're all just a work in progress. And I just applaud you for not giving up on the therapy, because there's so many people, I think, that either they've gone to therapists, didn't get or whoever, whatever the help was that they sought, and they didn't get the results that they wanted. And many people just quit, and they just say, this is how it's going to be. And just to be able to continue on. And for me, I always feel like it's just that there's a knower inside of us that just knows, just try this one more time, or do this, or something sparks that idea that maybe this time it would be different, and not to have the shame around needing to have some outside help to figure it out. I mean, I just think that we're kind of a culture that says, figure it out on your own and push through and get over it, and, march on and get your life done. And
yes,
it's like, but we're all in this together. We're all in this together, and every single one of us has something. So just to be able to help another human being is like, oh my God, right? And that's exactly what you do with your work that you're doing now, is helping other people who have those stories inside of them, for you to be able to help them to get it out. Because I think that's one of the hardest things in the world to do, is to be able to get your story out in a way that you're not, for lack of another word, it's late in the afternoon, and I'm going to say just vomiting it out on everybody, because that's not the story, right? And you have that beautiful gift of being able to take that information and take that story and shape it and mold it. So it has that flow, and it has that rhythm. And when you're reading it, you're in the story, you're part of the story, and you feel that. And I think it's beautiful how you have turned everything around, and how your life has become this beautiful golden gem that it is. And having Mike in your life, and his children, and your new grandbaby that's coming. And when's your son due? I mean, I know your son's not the one pregnant, but that's how we say it now, right? So when are they due?
June 24th.
The 24th. Okay, awesome. So we'll want to hear if you have a girl or a boy.
Oh,
or if they do.
A boy.
Do you know?
So yes, they already know that, which, I said, well, gosh, I just wanted to be surprised. And they're like, nope, we're not interested in that. Like, okay.
It's a boy. Yeah.
My
awesome.
my son was going to be happy with whatever, but I think he is secretly delighted it's a boy.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of secretly
Sure.
delighted it's a boy because I understand boys, because girls I don't understand.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody understands girls. I think we're
Yes,
complicated.
yes.
God. Oh, we might have a whole lot of girls pissed
Yeah.
off at us, but I do. This is no lie. I used to work in a restaurant, I don't know, probably 20 years ago or something. I had a coworker and I loved her to tears, but she would be complaining about her husband doing something. I was just like, but I don't get it. What part are you pissed off at? Like, what did he do that made you so mad? Because I
Right.
couldn't see it. And she would explain it again. It's like, I don't get it. So I would just call up my husband. I'd go, hey, I'm just telling you right now, I'm sorry for any of the crazy shit that I'm going to be pulling on you later on, because that's what we do. We just get crazy and take it
That's
out on
right.
you. So I'm apologizing in
Oh,
advance.
that's so funny.
Oh, God. So, Liz, I'm wondering if you are going to be singing for this little baby grand boy that's going to be coming into your life, and tell us how is it that you got into singing as we start to bring this in for a landing. How beautiful.
Oh,
I
well,
love
thank
that you
you.
sing. I love that you
Well, I'm sure I'll be singing to his name's going to be Roman, so I'm sure I will be singing to him.
Roman.
The way I got
Awesome.
started, and in part this was because of that feeling like I had to kind of insert myself into things to feel like I was worthy. So I kind of inserted myself
Yeah.
into a band that Mike plays the guitar. He has a job, but he loves being called a rock star a lot more. So we'll just leave it at that. So he had started a band, and it's a band of amateurs. There are no professionals. And so it's like, well, I want to sing because I always wanted to sing. And that is one of those things that I lost in my childhood because of what my brother did, because I went from being still an introverted little girl, but I loved to sing and dance and I loved to be on stage. And I lost all of that.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand why until later. So here was my chance to be up on stage. Well, it's a lot easier than it looks. And
Yeah.
being judgmental about my abilities, because I still was in the thick of my stuff, I persevered, because even though I don't sing perfectly, I do the best job I can. And I finally came to the realization that if I am on stage and I am singing and someone in the audience is being judgmental because I might have missed that note, all I have to say to them is, you're down there, I'm up here, you come up here and do it. Because it ain't as easy as you think.
Right. I love it. So you're actually singing in front of people. You're just not hanging out in the garage singing with the band. You're singing in
That
front
was
of people.
always the goal, was to get out and sing. So,
wow.
So I have sung in front of groups of about 200 people, and
wow.
And eventually I got more comfortable with it. But there's a lot of prep work that goes with it. There's a lot of practice that goes with it, and I am the non-practice queen. So that was part of it.
Okay.
I say I'm on hiatus. I'm not sure I will ever go back to it, because there are other things I love to do more than sing. And I can walk around the house and I can sing to the cats, or my neighbor's cat when I'm taking care of her. And that makes me almost as happy, and it's a lot less stressful than singing in front of a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And having to deal with band drama, because bands have drama. Sometimes I created the drama, I will admit that. But I think I was going to say, I think if there's a lesson for anybody that's listening to this, is that you are never too old. I skied for the first time when I was 52. That actually was what kind of pushed me back into therapy. That's a whole different story that I will not go into, because I know we're nearly at the end. But don't let age be a factor, because I'm done things now that I wish I could have done when I was younger, but I didn't, because I didn't know how, or I couldn't, because emotionally I wasn't ready to do that. So don't ever give up on yourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And accomplishing it now, there's so much more glory in that, because I think there's a place where we're saying to ourselves, I can't do that. I'm not good enough for that. That will never happen for me. I'm out of time. And then when you actually step up and you do it, it's just like, oh man, hot diggity, look at what I just did and what I accomplished. So what else is there that I can
Right.
accomplish? What is the next thing for me to be able to do, to grow into? I think it's
Yes.
fabulous. Liz, one of the things that you had said, I wrote this down when I had spoken with you last. You said one of your messages, and maybe this is your main message, is that you are here today and you are stronger than you think you are. Is that still the message that resonates with you, that you carry with you every day?
Yes. Yes. I am here for a reason.
Yeah.
And I am stronger than what I thought I potentially was, but I've repeatedly shown myself that. I've done things that I know other stronger, more emotionally stable people probably would never do because they were afraid. So there was an aspect of pushing past fear. I might not feel like I'm worthy of it, but darn it, I'm going to go do it. So yeah, I would agree with that statement.
Yeah. I just completely honor you and everything that you have overcome, where you're at, what you have accomplished. You can feel that energy from you, and it's so life-giving and alive, and it just feels so good. So I am so honored to have you with me on this hour. And I want to make sure that everybody knows how to contact you, because you don't do coaching on this. This is not, I wanted to talk about this because this is the podcast that I have. It's inspiration. It doesn't matter what that tragedy is. You can come to terms with it, and you can overcome it and grow into and discover the very best you that you are capable of being. And you're still doing that and still growing into that. And I think it's beautiful. But for people to be able to contact you, as far as being an author coach and ghostwriting and editor, for that they would go to, and I love the name of your company because you have 3 cats and the name of your company is Fuzzy Dog LLC. So it just makes me smile every time I see that. I love it. So it's just, I think it's fantastic. So if people want to contact you, that's the best way to get in touch with you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Through your website?
FuzzyDogLLC.com.
Okay.
And I'm on social media as
All
well under Fuzzy Dog and under my name. So, feel free to look me up.
Okay.
And I appreciate you saying that I don't coach on, traumatic events. But if someone does have a story that they are ready to tell, that's when you can come to me, because that's what I do.
Yeah. And it's obvious that you do it very, very well. You do it very well. And I just think that everything that you've learned and all of the life experiences and what you've discovered about yourself, it just weaves right into the work that you do. And that's so beautiful because you're able to take that story that a person may not be able to say eloquently, and you are able to direct that into that flow and energy where the reader gets to be part of the story while they're reading along, and not having all of the excess stuff that takes you away from the story to begin with. And I just think that's a huge gift. That's a huge talent. And I honor you for being able to help others get their book out of them. So beautiful. So just so everybody knows, Liz's information will be in the show notes. So don't worry about finding, having to come back through here and trying to find out what was her website. It will all be in the show notes, how to contact her, her name, and the social media. It will all be there for you. So no worries there. Liz, I just adore you. I'm honored you were on the show with me. And I just am I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled we had this time together. And I just like the idea of calling you my friend. So thank you, my friend, for being here with us and helping the world while you were healing. The world gets the benefit of your beautiful lessons.
Thank you, Nada. This has been so much fun, and I appreciate all the very thoughtful questions you asked me, because this is not an easy topic to talk about, but it is one that we all need to talk about because it's happening everywhere. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Liz. And to everybody out there in listener land, have a beautiful day. Please go back and listen to this again, because there's so many nuggets of wisdom and healing that's available in here. And if you listen to it again, you'll be able to pull out some more information and know that your life can become epic no matter what it was that laid in front of you. Until next week, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Please go to nadahogan.com for show notes and other information that you can use right away. If you like what you've heard here, please subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to rate and review right there on iTunes, Stitcher, or however you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends about it. We'll see you next week.